A decade ago, M23 looked to have gone the way of the IRA. It had been defeated in battle and signed a peace deal with the government. The movement was disarmed, its aging leaders arrested or under surveillance. M23 was a footnote in the history of the Congo. In 2021, out of nowhere, it was somehow back on the scene. From their mountain hideouts, the rebels have rapidly expanded, prompting South Africa, Kenya, and the UN to pour troops into the region. M23 are back with a vengeance, but why? Who is funding them? And who are the 5 men who have shaped the history of the movement? This is the story of Africa's secret rebel army. The M23 story starts with a man called Laurent Nkunda. Nkunda was born in Rutshuru, a town in the Democratic Republic of Congo, about a day's walk from the Uganda and Rwanda borders. North Kivu province is dominated by mountains, lakes, and forests. A landscape speckled by mines, the region also has a high population density because of the many refugee settlements. Nkunda studied psychology at university before crossing the border to join the Tutsi forces during the Rwandan Civil War. When the war ended, he returned to DRC and continued a military career. But in 2005, he announced a rebellion against the government. With a group of loyal soldiers, he formed the National Congress for the Defense of the People. Nkunda claimed to be protecting the Tutsi ethnic minority from Hutu aggression. From his base of operations in Rutshuru, Nkunda fought against local militia groups called Mai Mai, Hutu paramilitaries, the Congolese army, and even the UN. In the chaos of North Kivu, friends and enemies changed quickly. Nkunda claimed to be a Christian minister and rebel for Christ. He offered to open humanitarian corridors for refugees, trying to cultivate a positive international image despite accusations of war crimes. In 2009, he was captured by Rwanda whilst crossing the border. Nkunda's rebel movement signed a peace treaty and agreed to stop the fighting. In exchange, the group was allowed to become a political party, and its soldiers were integrated into the Congolese army. Nkunda was now out of the picture, living under house arrest in Rwanda. But it wasn't long before things started to fall apart again. Corruption was rife in the army. Senior officers did something called Operation Return. Money would be sent from Kinshasa to pay soldiers, officers would take a cut, and then return the funds to the government without paying the troops. In 2012, General Bosco Ntaganda led a group of 300 soldiers to rebel against the government. Most were former members of the Nkunda Rebellion. They took on a new name, M23, arguing the March 23 peace agreement had been broken by the Congolese authorities. Ntaganda, known as the Terminator, was famous for his relaxed attitude to high civilian casualties. He had served with Nkunda before the two fell out over his ruthless behaviour. But Ntaganda did not only loot and pillage, he began running local mines, flour mills, and even initiated small-scale tourism projects. The rebels took control of the local economy. M23 forces were disciplined and well armed, using night vision and mortars. Soldiers were led by an up-and-coming commander, Sultani Makenga, an experienced fighter from Rutshuru. Congolese troops began to defect to the rebels as M23 advanced towards the regional capital of Goma. Government officials fled by boat as the UN peacekeepers chose not to engage. M23 marched into Goma and threatened to continue the advance if the Congolese government did not come to the negotiating table. The rebel army was rumoured to be supported by Rwanda and Uganda. With M23 controlling the border, minerals from mines in North Kivu flowed into the two countries, boosting their economies and giving them debt repayment rewards from the IMF and World Bank. To solve the crisis, 11 African countries met to agree a peace settlement, which allowed Rwanda and Uganda some influence in affairs whilst maintaining Congolese sovereignty. The M23 rebels were not even invited. different rebel leaders reacted differently to the news. The M23 spokesman, Bertrand Bisimwa, stated he hoped it would bring an end to the fighting. Jean-Marie Virunga, a former bishop, encouraged his fellow rebels to embrace the peace deal and evacuate Goma. Sultani Makenga rejected the plan, expelling the ex-bishop from M23 for political immaturity. M23 began to break apart as the Terminator lost control over the different factions. Despite eventually retreating from Goma, fighting continued into 2013, as the remnants of M23 took refuge in the mountains along the border. The Terminator fled to Rwanda, while Bisimwa and Makenga headed into Uganda. In Rwanda, the Congolese Terminator handed himself in to the International Criminal Court. It was rumoured he feared for his safety as the new M23 factions left him isolated. By 2014, it looked like M23 was over. Leaders in prison or quietly monitored, its soldiers disarmed and growing old in refugee camps. So when news reached the world Sultani Makenga was trying to make a comeback in 2017, no one paid much attention. When he set up his new headquarters in an isolated volcano, it made a few headlines, but no one was seriously concerned. Things only changed in 2020 as the fragile three-way relationship between DRC, Rwanda, and Uganda began to fall apart. Competition between Rwanda and Uganda for access to mineral rights has been growing in recent years. Both have accused each other of funding paramilitary organizations. But things reached a head in 2020 when the Congolese government agreed a deal with an engineering company to build roads and infrastructure from North Kivu gold mines to the Ugandan border. The company is linked to the president of Uganda's brother. During an M23 attack on a border town, Ugandan soldiers stepped in to defend the engineering. As the Rwanda-Uganda rivalry has grown, M23 has expanded its territory. Now in their 50s, the old rebel leaders have returned and reunited. Rumours are spreading that the grandfather of M23, Laurent Nkunda himself, has been released from house arrest in Rwanda and returned to the battlefield. The frontline soldiers are young Tutsi men from refugee camps, but the weapons are alleged to be supplied by Rwanda. With M23 attacks escalating, Uganda also seems to have shifted its policy. The rebels are reported to be moving freely through Uganda and into Rwanda. Minerals are now flowing into Uganda through border crossings controlled by M23. Uganda and Rwanda may have found some kind of compromise, but DRC refuses to engage with M23. The Congolese government is now aiming for total disarmament of the group and refuses to negotiate with them. The rhetoric on both sides has escalated. Emboldened by the Rwandan support, Bisimwa has talked about breaking away from the DRC to form a new country. With reports that the Rwandan army are now fighting alongside M23, the international community are again trying to intervene. UN, South African and Kenyan troops are on the ground, but the solution to this crisis will likely come through agreement between DRC and its two mineral-hungry neighbours. Now more than ever, M23 is a card in a game being played by states and companies. Whilst it enjoys some local support, its leaders are heavily reliant on Rwandan assistance and Uganda's blind eye. But as a negotiating chip in a regional conflict, M23 is not going away anytime soon. If you enjoyed this content and would like more, please subscribe to The Africa Review on YouTube.